Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nan Posios. I'm the Director of Development and Alumni Relations here at the Stamps School of Art and Design. Welcome to our latest installment of discussions with the Dean. We developed this series of virtual events in response to the pandemic, and we've found that we've been able to engage lots of our community members through the different topics related to the Stamps School and art and design and education. So thank you guys for joining us. We're going to spend the next hour and a half, I think, talking today about the future of the creative workforce. We have a wonderful panel with us today. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank Aaron, Angela, Cesar, and Christine for being with us here today and sharing their stories with us. So with that, I will let Guna Nadara take over.
Thank you, Nan, and thank you everyone for being here. As you heard, Nan, this is really an opportunity for us to discuss the question of the future of the creative workforce. And today we have a great panel with us. These are people with incredible degrees of talent and a very diverse range of experiences and career paths, as you could see from their slides. I'm grateful for your participation, Aaron, Cesar, Angela, and Christine, and I look forward to our conversation ahead. Our discussions today are really about looking at the future of the creative workforce and what are the ways in which hiring practices in creative industries have changed, or have they changed at all? How will they continue to evolve as we pursue goals of a more equitable and diverse workforce? And I hope that we will also be able to discuss ways in which STEM students and alums and generally artists and designers find ways to continue to participate in global citizenry. Today, our panelists will share a little bit of their experience and their professional journeys first, and then offer their insights into these important topics. So let's meet them. Aaron Wolk, Angela Topa, Cesar Velasquez, and Christine Golus are here today. So Cesar first. Cesar is the head of effect management, effect animation at Walt Disney Studios. Cesar has been with Walt Disney for more than 18 years, where he has served as head of effects animation for films like Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia. He was the STEM School commencement speaker in 2019, where he encouraged our students to put together a 3 to 5 year plan for their future, to be intentional about their goals. And Cesar, you really jolted them in some ways into action. Cesar, with your almost 2 decades of experience in the industry, could you share with us ways in which you've seen hiring practices for entry-level creatives evolve over the past years? How have they continued to change since the pandemic? And has it changed much since the pandemic? What can recent graduates do to make themselves more competitive, both in your field and generally in the creative sector?
Yeah, can everyone hear me? Okay, good. I'll make sound. Okay, I think what I can do is kind of give a brief overview of how we hire at Disney, and just sort of the structure of how it works, how typically like students come into the building and get hired for different jobs. So hopefully this kind of applies to what you're looking for, Guna. And it's not just, let me know. I just wrote down some quick notes, and if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt and ask me anything. So, and also these notes are really in no particular order. So, and also these are more specific to the departments that I used to run, like the effects department for the building, or for working on a production or like a film or something. So typically when it comes to hiring, we don't typically hire students for staff positions. And there are two kind of roles we have for artists at the studio. staff and sort of like a run of show. Staff is more of like on a permanent basis. You are there during a show, and in between shows, you're still hired and you're still sort of growing your career, and you just kind of go from project to project to project. And so it's more of a long-term support from the studio for the artist. And then for shows, you know, our work is kind of seasonal. We typically release films around Thanksgiving and in the spring on sort of alternating years. So in leading up to the release of a film, we tend to ramp up a department to get the staff level that we need to finish the project. And those are sort of show hires. And we hire them, they work on the show, and then when the project's finished, they're done, and then they kind of look for other work, and we may bring them back for later shows. And so when we're hiring for those kind of projects, typically we don't hire a lot of students straight out of school. There are a few reasons for this. One, there's a lot of talent locally that are professional talent. They have experience working on these projects before. Other people in the building may have worked with them before, so we kind of know who they are, how they work, and it sort of makes the process of hiring a lot easier. You know, and for those hires that do go on shows, when they, you know, if they work out well during the show, when they come back, when another show comes in, again, it just makes the whole process easier, again, just to kind of go out to those students or to those people we hired before and say, hey, come on back. You don't have to like really interview, we know how you work, and it makes that whole process easier. But for, you know, and so as a result, it makes it harder for students to try to get their foot into the door. And for that, what we found is that has been really successful are programs for students. So we have two programs. We have an apprenticeship program and an internship program. And internship program is for students who are still in school, either, I think maybe it's like graduate level. I don't know if it extends to undergraduate, it might, but that's typically 8 weeks. And during that 8 weeks, we bring them in, and it's for all departments, from my department to if you want to be a production manager or be a developer, you know, it runs the whole gamut of all departments, but it's about 8 weeks. We teach them how we do animation, or how we work, how we create animation at the studio. They go through the whole process of being given assignments, mentorship, reviews, and then they kind of bring that experience back to school with them. The other program, which is the apprenticeship program, that's a 1-year program. And, you know, and they do get paid during that time. And the same thing, they get assignments and reviews, but, you know, it's usually 6 months of training. And then that last 6 months, they usually line it up so then the artists, the students actually help out on the film that's currently in production. And so they get real world experience. They get a credit on the film. They get to learn sort of how it's like to sort of elevate their craft, to work on a film, deal with that, you know, time deadline for the first time. And then if it works out, then they, you know, get brought back. So most of our, you know, apprentice artists, majority of them, you know, the great thing is a lot of our staff artists now come from that program. And the apprenticeship program is for students who are recently out of school. Maybe I think it's like less than 2 years out of school, and they can apply for that. And then the good thing is, yeah, most of our staff artists come from that program. The difficult part is still that getting into that program. There are limited spots. You know, you have to get your reel reviewed, go through several layers before like the department heads review it. And you're also competing with, you know, students around the United States and around the world to kind of get in there. And so that's sort of the difficult part. But once you're in there, that's where we find the most of the success with the students.
Thank you, Cesar. Next, we'll have Angela Topacio. So Angela is the co-founder and managing partner of GYRO Creative in Detroit. She has over 20 years of experience in the development and management of brands and design, and is deeply passionate about the revitalization of Detroit. She has worked with clients like Mercedes-Benz, Olympia Development, and the Downtown Detroit Partnerships. Angela, you've led GYRO since 1999 and have helped the firm grow into a deeply diverse artist-led studio with talent from a wide range of disciplines and backgrounds. Angela, could you share with us some ways in which you've seen hiring practices evolve over your years in the industry? What are some of the steps firms like GYRO are taking or could take to advance their diversity, equity, and inclusion goals as they pertain to hiring? Is it something that you seek out in your hiring practices?
Sure. Thank you, Guna. Everyone can hear me too? Okay, great. So yes, I think it is really important and relevant to kind of describe a little bit about our company. We are a 20-person brand identity studio. We're not an advertising agency or a marketing firm. We really work with companies so that they really understand who they are, why they exist. And then we develop visual and verbal identities for them so that they can better connect with people. And so heading into this question, Guna, as you say, one of the things that I've really noticed over my my 2 decades of doing this is there was a real push, even about, I would say 10 to 15 years ago, about really wanting to develop a team that, and making sure that any additions to the team were a cultural fit, right? And what does fit really mean? Culture is very important, but we know culture is about a bunch of different kinds of people. And so fit was really making sure that people came into the company that were exactly like you or exactly like the other people that you've hired. And so then you get this instance of homogeneity, which really doesn't help a lot. It doesn't help from a broad perspective. It doesn't help, our clients necessarily. It doesn't help our team to just really learn more about the rest of us in the world and what's going on. So that is really starting to shift, I think. In fact, I think a lot of organizations now are developing a strong platform that's centered around a belief in a value system. So I'm noticing a lot of companies, especially ones that we work with, they have mission statements and vision statements. Well, now it's more centered around a purpose and also around the beliefs and values. So, and certainly I think any of the great companies, especially in metropolitan areas, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are likely part of that system. And on that note, I think that I've noticed, especially in the Detroit area, there are a lot of larger companies who are actually hiring DEI professionals or DEI officers. And it's really interesting to see what's happening here, especially in the last, I'd say 5-7 years or so. A lot of these positions are put in place just as a token, right? Just as a box checker to make sure, yes, we've hired this many women or this many African Americans or people with veteran status, but there's not much follow-up after that. I'm starting to see a lot of companies really put in a metric system that are starting to measure not just that they've done this, but really what is the long-term impact, short and long-term impact, and how do we get better at that? I'm also noticing a lot of companies just, it's even a problem still, as you probably are all aware of, just the awareness and the education that really needs to go in diversity, equity, inclusion. What does that really mean? So there's a lot of effort going into that. And it is, it's not something that's a one and done. It is to us here at GYRO, especially, it is something that is like hygiene or like working out. You have to keep doing it in order to see real long-term impact, meaningful impact. Let's see, I've got a few notes here as well. So at GYRO, what we have been doing is we've been in existence for the last 2 decades, as I've said. We've really evolved our business models to who we used to be. So we really just started out, just really being concerned about the highest level of creativity and, of course, bottom line. My husband and my partner, we both share a similar set of values and beliefs. And especially as things started to change during the recession, and then, of course, during COVID and all the things that we've all gone through, we started to realize we can bring our belief and value system into our business and make it so much more than the bottom line. So I think we found a way to do that. We're really enjoying the quality of life for all of us, for our employees too. And we are in the process of rebranding ourselves. Just through that rebranding system, which is honestly, because it's our own, it's taken us about 5 to 7 years just to rebrand ourselves. We're hoping to launch it in January. So new name, everything, we've developed a declaration and a manifesto, and we're really using that as a sort of a guardrails or a filter or almost every decision that we make. So who we hire, we want to make sure that the people that we hire also subscribe to a similar set of values and belief system. Otherwise, they're not going to be happy working here, and vice versa. So we use that set of guardrails, even the clients that we work with now. So we have found, especially over the pandemic, a lot of companies are really, really starting to rethink who they are. What do they mean? How do they connect with people in a larger audience? So we are working with a lot of companies who are trying to engage their employees in a different way, whether it's about health and well-being, really understanding what diversity, equity, inclusion means. We're seeing a lot of, it's the plus side too, we're seeing a lot of change in that area. As far as applicants go, I will say, unfortunately, being in the city of Detroit, which is about 80% African-American, we have a pretty good diversity outside of that. We have one African-American designer, unfortunately. And so I'll talk a little bit more about him in just a second. But I want to say, outside of the applicants that are coming to us, we can't just expect them to come to us. So what Matt, my husband, and I are finding is that we actually have to go outside and do a lot more work. Some of it is very upstream. So we have some, we both belong to different business associations. We really have a lot of great relationships that we've developed over the years. We have a lot of conversations with them to refer people if they know that we're hiring. Let's see, what else do we have an internship program with an inner city organization in Detroit. It's called Rack It Up Detroit. And they hook kids in by teaching them the game of squash, which is typically an all-white elite game. And then they really work on all of their academics, help them with life skills. They work with their parents. Even they work with them all the way through college, and some of them are even now board members of this organization. And so we have an internship program with them. And a lot of them are very interested in any of the aspects of our business. We also work every summer with Detroit's program, Grow Detroit's Young Talent. And so just really exposing kids, some of them don't even realize that you can, just because you're creative and you can draw, that you can actually have a sustainable living doing that. So they're always told that, no, you have to do something else. I think many of us were told that is when we wanted to go to art school originally. And on that note, we have the African-American designer who we hired, Dion Mixon. He recognizes that there is a lack of diversity among designers. And so he himself has developed a board game that teaches kids all about the world of design. And so he has a program with the city of Detroit public school system, and he goes and he teaches kids who might be interested in drawing or might be interested in brand, and it really encourages them to seek out these kinds of programs. And I think we just really need to be more involved on that level at an early stage, because they're not coming to us. And there's got to be, we have to understand, why are they not coming to us? So that's, I hope I'm answering the question properly. When we're doing a lot of inside things. Okay, good.
Perfect, Angela. Thank you so much. I'm really intrigued by the whole idea of cultural fit. And, and I know that we creatives like to think that we don't fit easily. And I'm really interested in understanding how you work with people who actually don't fit, but actually might be a good fit exactly because of that, because they bring that kind of creative energy. And I'm really noticing that both you and Cesar talked about this whole pipeline system where you're trying to bring different people, younger people into the system with apprenticeships, internships. So thank you so much, Angela. You are on the mark. And so next we'll hear from Christine. Christine Golus is the Senior Managing Director of Q Limited in Ann Arbor. Christine was recruited 2 years after the firm was created by the late Stamps professor Doug Hazeltine. I'm still fascinated by this, Christine, and we need to catch a cup of coffee and talk about Doug. Before joining Q, she worked for Quorum advisor Chauncey Cotton, one of the original Madison Avenue Mad Men. During her time of leadership, she has been instrumental in helping Q to become a global design firm. So as the design industry has evolved, Christine, what changes have you seen in the roles and responsibilities that entry and mid-career level creatives have had? And to further that, what types of skills and preparation do industries place more value on than before? Are there some values that they are feeling that it's much more critical than others? How do you see those skills continuing to change in the near future?
Alrighty, well, thank you for having me. And I was going to say I really appreciated Angela talking about the sort of culture and values, because especially with a company, when you're always having to look at the bottom line and paying people, a lot of it is just getting the work in and getting it done. So I really appreciated that. And then Cesar, what I appreciated was the specificity of what your hires are coming for, right? They're animators or whatever they're hiring, that's a very specific thing. So what I was going to say from my end, what I'm finding, one of our questions here was, as the design industry has evolved, what changes have you seen in the roles and responsibilities for entry and mid-career? The biggest thing that I've seen is that because we're the type of studio we are, anybody who has a variety of skills will do well, meaning that they can take basic design chops and put it across media. So that's been super great. I mean, it just doesn't end, right? Because we aren't just only branding. So, we're doing the branding and then we're applying it to the web, to an animation, to an HTML email campaign. So I really am print, and I really appreciate how much designers are responsible for these days, right? How much they can do. So that's what I've seen really change. The range of work that designers are working on. And that doesn't mean that they're expert in all those fields, but they know how to think with those various medium. And, and then if we have to get a real expert to, do the final video cut, etc., then we'll go to that expertise. So we're getting designers that really have broad expertise, and it really helps. And in another Stamps thing I was in, there was a comment about topography, and it was just so nice to hear that, that really topography still is a real core skill set for anybody coming through here. So anyways, that was for a graphic designer. I was going to say, as far as for us, hiring entry level is not a problem. they're excited to get a first job, you know, either it's an internship or a junior designer. We have a huge range of work, so they get a tremendous amount of skill, much skill. And what we've often said is we've prepped a lot of young designers for their next steps. So we just have a long list of folks that have gone on to do just wonderful things. And I've often heard them say, oh my God, I learned so much when we were with you. So I think for us, the area that's tricky is keeping the mid-level. So you're going to get the seniors who have decided that this is where we are in life. For me, living in this area was good. I had an opportunity to grow at this company. I made that choice that this is where I was going to stay. I had family, so that worked out well. But if you have a mid-level person, I think what we've been finding is there's a lot of salary competition, or the idea of salary competition. Doesn't mean maybe it's going to always be out there, but I think as a small local firm, we're competing with other groups, and especially if it's any kind of larger company that are going to come in. So I think that mid-level, ideally you're finding someone who believes that staying at a firm for such a long time is not a detriment to their career, right? And how to make that, be actually a positive rather than like, it's time to go somewhere else. So mid-level salary, and then, the tenure. The other thing, I think the most skills and preparation, I would say communication is huge. And I've kind of mentioned this before that, I like to call myself the sensitive artist type. That's kind of, I guess, my nature. And I'm actually a little more introverted, but the truth is in our business, there's that communication. And so I really appreciate creatives that have to come in and say, I know they have to be able to speak. They have to be able to roll with, all those quick questions that get asked. And then what I'm amazed at is the level of communication across, like here we're on Zoom. You might have to get on a phone call. You have to write a cogent email. You have to get on Slack. You're on, an on-site in-person thing. So I think the modes and levels of communication are ridiculous. And to see people coming into the industry that just are handling it, it's a lot. I mean, it's a lot for all of us, but that's a grace. I think that has become a requirement now, is being able to communicate across all those channels. And I think, some of the usual, as far as the person, I think the sun is starting to set, so I might be getting dark here. As far as the type of people, I still really appreciate, folks that really want to listen, that they're humble enough to just say they don't get that or they don't know that. A lot of kind of honesty. And I think that gets to maybe where those values you were talking about, Angela, what are we all here and doing this for, right? We're not developing, that we're here to be rock stars necessarily, right? But we are trying to do good work, and that takes a certain, I think to do good work, it has to take a certain amount of, honesty with yourself, with the process, etc. So I think that's, see if I hit some of the points maybe.
Thank you very much, Christine. I'm feeling good that when I'm hearing from you that someone you're looking always for people who are able to work across different media, and that's something that we see as a hallmark of our program. We want our students to, even if they don't become proficient in or even have deep expertise in a particular media, which is what a lot of other art and design schools are doing, we feel that we need to teach our students to become familiar and become comfortable enough to learn it, comfortable enough to work with others to complement what they are doing in a team or in a collaborative way. And so it was good to hear from you, from your experience, that this is still an important thing that you are looking at. And of course, the value of communications is critical, and we emphasize that to our students. But it's good to hear that from you. Thank you, Christine. Next is, and last is Aaron. Aaron Wolk has over 15 years in the creative industry. First as a freelance creative, then as an art director, and now as an entrepreneur. He's a co-founder and chief creative officer of Bombas, an apparel brand founded with a mission to help those in need. And again, I'm hearing this whole discourse of values and what are you doing this for, coming up again and again among all of you. And so it's good to hear where Aaron stands on that, and it's clear from his company. Bombas was launched as a sock company that donated 1 pair of socks for each pair purchased, with the goal of helping the homeless and eradicating poverty. He has a deep breadth of knowledge of the career paths available to STAMPS graduates. He also serves on our Dean's Advisory Council, and how creators can align their work with their values. Our mission at STAMPS is to educate and inspire the next generation of artists and designers, encouraging them to play active roles as global citizens. Aaron, in your view, how can creators in the workforce pursue work and careers that aligns with their goals, and in this case, their values, to have a positive impact on society?
Yeah, thank you, Guna. Good to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. I think it's hard. I think recent graduates coming out of school have a lot of challenges, ahead of them, and trying to figure out the way to prioritize can be difficult at times. That being said, I still think that work we do with purpose always ends up being more fulfilling to us, and I think that's probably more evident even in creatives than maybe any other type of profession. I think when we're doing something that we're passionate about and excited about, it seems to get that extra attention, and honestly ends up having an end product that's better. I think that there are some specific ways. I think I would encourage recent and young graduates to join companies that really align with their personal missions. I think if you're really passionate about sustainability, you should join a company that's passionate about sustainability. And that doesn't mean it has to be, the most, eco-friendly organization, but make sure that they are passionate about the things you are. And we heard a lot about DEI. I think, if you join a company that's passionate about DEI and that's something you are passionate about, I think you're going to have a better time in your tenure there. And I think sometimes it can be as simple as that. The parent companies of some of these things may be harder, but can you get on teams that are really interested about things you're interested in? I'd also say, it's definitely more of an uphill battle, but I've seen a lot of young employees influence a lot of change. So if you are at a company or find yourself joining a company with a project or a position that you're really excited about, but maybe they don't have a DEI initiative that you think is up to par, I think that there is more of a voice for young employees today than there probably ever has been before. And I think that's a good thing. I think we're, a mid-sized company. We continue to be driven by our employees. We're an employee-led organization, and I think we try to mean, what we say. So if there's something that's important of values to the employees, we take that to heart. So recognizing that even if you have only a year or two of experience, you probably have more influence than you believe. And I think this is also a pretty interesting time. I think it's a workforce pro environment currently. I think that there's definitely an inflection point that's happened over the last year or two, where I think that the person seeking employment or who is employed has a lot more leverage than they used to. And look, as a founder of a business, that's hard sometimes, but here in this panel, I would say, you should embrace that as an opportunity and a responsibility, but also use it to the advantage of not just yourself personally, but also to the values that are important. I also think, if making ends meet is still the thing you need most, and maybe you had to join a company that was not as philanthropic as you wished, I think there are tons of volunteer opportunities out there. I still volunteer through my creative services abilities, and we have a big executive program here at the company, which is it's great. We do a lot of volunteering in the more traditional way, but skills-based volunteering is becoming something that's so valuable to the world. So if you find something that you're really excited or passionate about, believe me, they always need a better graphic designer. They always need somebody with a point of view or some more talent. I mean, we've all seen the terrible, ad journal placements or brochures or home pages or whatever it might be. And if you can say, look, I'm going to give 10 or 20 hours a month, which I don't think is too much to be able to donate, especially earlier in your career. It was something I did a lot when I don't think I had the money to be able to donate, monetarily, but it's kind of come full circle to me now, which is where skills-based volunteering is something that's of real value. And I think finding those organizations and embedding you there, I've also seen a number of people end up getting full-time jobs through their what originated as a volunteer opportunity, all of a sudden they became, really influential within the organization and indispensable in a lot of ways. And all of a sudden they found funding to be able to say, well, let's have this graphic designer position, and this is an entry-level place. And so I think that there are opportunities. I think you gotta make your way a little bit, and that's good. I think. I don't want to say it's the last ditch effort, but you can, as an entrepreneur, I think you can always, look at the right point to trying to be a founder of your own company. I think a lot of the things that we have in our company today came out of things that we had in other places that we worked, my co-founders and I, but also a lot of things that weren't in those places, and the way they treated employees, the way they listened to employees, the way they had transparency. So, I think it's like any relationship in your life. You find the things that you like and the things that you don't like, and try to make sure that you take the best of those other experiences along the way. I think I heard some of the other panelists speak about how homogeneous some workforces have become, and I think it's ultimately to the detriment of those companies. I think varied perspectives, various lived experiences are what drive businesses to be better. And I would say in no industry better than creative, right? I mean, we are creatives. We are trying to create things. If everybody comes from the same point of view, with the same aesthetic, in the same taste, it's going to be boring, And I think we have to make sure that we as a creative industry are pushing the other industries around us and are these things, even if it's not on a company level. How can we make sure that we are inspiring those teams around us? And we have a saying here: we're not all alike, but we're all like-minded. And I think that's something that we really try to preach all the time, which is we've got alignment on the big picture things, but that doesn't mean that we all have to be the same.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And again, the values theme, and you seem to have found a different way of tackling the cultural fit issue that Angela brought up. Try and find the right fit, especially as with your sense that today employees have much more power than they actually think they do. Mm-hmm. and sometimes embracing that power and making that choice in aligning from the very beginning as far as possible their values with the values of the company that they are seeking to join. And I like the way that you find a backdoor way to say, hey, look, I'm not working in a company that fits my values completely, but I can do something still with my values in a way that addresses it through voluntary work. And so thank you so much, Aaron. So the next what we are going to do is I hope you did enjoy the insights that people have. I certainly learned a lot, and I'm really keen to see what some of you took away from some of what has been shared. Next, we will have an opportunity for all of you in smaller groups to share your own thoughts on how trends in the workforce and hiring practices have evolved over the years, how it aligns or not with goals of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really hope also that you would take the whole values question that has been brought up by the panelists, multiple panelists, to heart in terms of your discussions. And so Nan and her team will now facilitate the actual group discussions.
Great, thank you, Guna. So in a moment, you guys will all be separated into different breakout sessions. And in these groups, we'll spend about 25 minutes talking with each other and sharing. And so I think, Alex, are you breaking us up now? Oh, okay. So in these groups, we'll have a chance to share your experiences and your stories, and really dig into the two questions that Guna just mentioned. We'll put that into the chat as well to broadcast, so everyone has them while they're in the breakout rooms. Does anyone have any questions? I don't. Yes, Kelly.
Before we do the breakout room,
Yes, of course.
I was just curious for the four panelists. How do new graduates best present themselves in a portfolio? Because I don't know if they're presenting themselves online, they're presenting themselves in person, and just maybe some specifics from each person of how you do that these days. Thank you.
That's a great question, Kelly. Does somebody want to start? I'm looking at my panelists right now to see. I can start calling on someone. Go. Thank you, Christine.
We were just on a portfolio, I think, discussion the other day with John Luther in a group. And I think the thing that, well, this is interesting because we have an intern here is Jordan LeMaid, who's a recent Stamps graduate. And I haven't even finished telling her about this, but in her portfolio, I think she was very eager to show real work. Meaning something that she had done for someone, so she could say this was real work. But really the best work was her student work. So trying to look at each project that it's actually a great piece, and I don't actually care that it wasn't done as real work. I don't know how to describe that better. So it wasn't something from, and here's something I did for a real job, because it actually wasn't very good. So anyways, something to think about. I don't need to see real work. I think I need to see good work, because I know that you can then do that.
If I could add one more thing to that, Christine, I agree completely with everything you're saying. Another thing that we really like to see here at GYRO is not just the work or the real work or the not real work, but it's also how did you arrive at that work? I like to really see the process. Maybe there's sketches, maybe there's notes, maybe there's even some videos on how you got there, but it really shows the thinking process and how you approach a problem to solve it.
Yeah, I would second that. When we're reviewing work, there's a perception for the work that we do here that you have to sort of have this level of polish and professionalism in the real, but for students, we actually look at it through like a bit of a different lens. We look at it through sort of like intention and sort of like the story they're trying to tell to what they were saying before in some of the previous comments of it's not just the work, but also showing the process of how you got there. And the work doesn't need to be complete, but it has to sort of like, when the students try to tell a story, it sort of wants us to bring them in and have a conversation about the work they've done. So it's not so much about professional level work, but especially when it comes to student work and their personal work, something that's a bit more personable and interesting to them as an individual versus like trying to appeal to us on the professional side.
Great, thank you. Any other questions that for all the panelists while we're here? No? Okay, great. So we'll break out into breakout rooms for about 25 minutes, and then we'll all come back and hear what all the breakout rooms had to share. So Alex, go ahead. Thank you.
Anyone else, any other group wants to share very quickly what some of your members discussed?
I'll just say that in our group, we had Julia and Todd, and so we had the two coasts, and talking about, what you're really looking for is that creativity, no matter, where they're from. But anyways, it was just super interesting to hear Julia and Todd's coastal comments. I almost wanted Todd and Julia to say something that they said there in our group meeting, but I think the main thing, Julia, is that they have trouble getting designers. They have a niche area in pharmacy, working for pharmaceuticals branding. I don't know, Julie, you want to add anything? What you were?
Oh, of course. Yeah, so my niche is really, after corporate branding, it's really into pharma branding. And my branding firm is within an ad agency. We're part of IPG Health, which is the largest health network in the world. So we have every pharma client, every drug needs a new logo, a new brand, a new visual system. And I started in corporate branding. I went to Landor and then Lippincott in New York, which I knew about because I've read about it, but I feel like I love what I do now because it's very challenging. But we are having a really hard time recruiting designers because they're just not aware of it. And every project has a lot of meaning because you're talking about drugs, patients, they're hopeful that they'll get better, whatever disease you may have. Working on one of the COVID projects recently, which was very exciting. So that is like one of the things, and I think East Coast, West Coast, we're all looking for, great talent, diverse set of people, the way they think, maybe where they're from, their backgrounds. My team, we speak like 17 languages between us. I think we're very diverse, but again, I'm not looking for the ethnic background per se, but really the talent and, can you talk about your concepts and your design? So just, I'll stop talking, but, interesting, that I work within a huge company and no one knows about us.
Thank you, Julia. Others who would like to share some of the discussions in your group?
I would just touch base on the fact that DEI initiatives are a huge initiative within a large multinational global corporation such as Adidas. We have tons of entry points within the brand around the world. Europe, Asia Pacific, United States, in all types of different backgrounds, sport, fashion, tons of different sports, different types of design, graphic, footwear, product, color, materials, and graphics, that type of identity work. So there's a lot of different entry points into the brand from different locations. So being multinational includes multi-race, multi-ethnicity, multi-experiential background. So it's a very robust bouquet of experiences and backgrounds into the brand. So having the DEI initiatives come to the forefront is important at this time, so that you do have a very robust bouquet of different flowers versus the same type of flower.
Thanks, Todd.
Yeah.
I love I love the flower metaphor. Any other group wants to share?
I can go.
Angela?
Yes, thank you. Anyone on our group, Brenda, Esther, Cleo, if I misrepresent or need to, or you want to build on what I'm going to say, please do jump in and interrupt. I won't be offended. But I think maybe a point of difference from where Julia, you were speaking about, you have a lot of diversity already, and so you're really interested in just the talent. We were talking about more or less, we talked about a few things, but we were speaking about where do you put the most weight? Is it the person or is it their portfolio, their creativity? So we spoke a bit about that. I think Brenda was saying, you know, Brenda's at IDEO, I believe, that you never know where you're going to find that those aspects of that person that might contribute in a very meaningful way to the team. Brenda, please speak if I'm not representing you correctly. And I would say, unlike Julia, your company, our company works with a wide variety of so many different organizations, companies, placemaking. And so we try to find a balance of both the creativity, but also the person. And how do you find who's that person and what do they bring to the table? How do you find those golden nuggets that says, yes, you are the right person that's going to add a lot or fit, right? So those are a couple of things that we talked about. Esther was talking about arriving at, I think some of us were at the School of Art at the time where there wasn't any focus on career. You were just kind of left to your own. And so we kind of had to find our own way. And some of us were lucky enough to have business interests and some great mentors, and we found our way. And people like Esther found her way through social media platforms. So yeah, so I guess the question is kind of, you know, coming back to the school, how can we all help you shape a curriculum or maybe a focus or develop a way of thinking so students are not left out on their own? If anyone
Thank you, Angela. I think you summarized us very well.
Okay.
Anyone else wants to add insights, perhaps not even from your group, some things that you have been really wanting to share?
Well, once again, I'll say thank you for making these opportunities available.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So what do you think, Nan? Are we at a point where I can?
Oh, I don't know. Is Maxine, were you about to say something?
Oh yeah, Maxine.
I was muted, but I loved what Brenda in our group said, which was one of the things that she looks for, not just tangible examples of somebody's talent or very traditional examples, but she looks for somebody who might even be pivoting to a second career. And one of the things she pointed out as a great demonstration of somebody's talent would be to be able to write and to be able to write well. And as an employer, I can say that amen, because that somehow transfers in so many areas of the work. And it really is something that is often lacking in candidates. And I think it's a great thing to pass on to the students, that they should never think that that is unimportant, that they, if they can develop those skills. I mean, she didn't say that you had to be an author, but to be able to craft a really compelling email is a very, very valuable talent.
Thank you, Maxine. And I'll plug in for the school and what we are doing. We actually have a strong emphasis on writing. We have
Great.
instructors who are dedicated to writing, and our students write amazingly well. And writing, there are two core writing requirements in that students meet before they graduate. And that's exactly for the same reasons Brenda and Maxine were highlighting. You know, writing is an important skill, we feel, and we've heard that from many of the industry partners and employers we have talked to over the years. So,
does anyone else have anything to say?
One last comment.
I have a quick comment question. So I'm working at Thule, and at our company, we don't have DEI. Like, it kind of feels like we're stuck back in the early 90s sometimes, but it just, as I'm, you know, part of these conversations, and we are part of the outdoor industry that is talking about DEI. What are students kind of looking at when they learn about DEI, and how, as an employer, can I respond to that? I'm just curious, like, how it's being taught at university level, you know?
So great.
Maybe
question.
That's too big of a question for right now, but.
So it's a great question, and I would love to say some things about it. So one is we think there is value in diversity of perspectives and diversity of persons, meaning we are committed to making sure that our school looks very different. Very different people feel comfortable here. They feel like they're at home here, and that they can learn effectively here, that they can share their own unique perspectives. And we see that as valuable if you are going to be producing culture. We want that culture to be produced by people who come from different cultures. So that's the diversity of persons. We really emphasize that. We emphasize that in our admissions and recruitment efforts. We work very hard to recruit a very diverse class each year. But then we also have been, over the last 7 years or maybe 8 years now, we've been funding internally course revisions and program revisions so that there's a greater level of diversity and equity and inclusion included in what we teach. So, for example, art history. So we say, look, you know, traditionally we've been teaching Western art history. Let's make sure that the students are getting a diversity of perspectives, and perspectives that are both critical of that Western canons, but also providing new avenues to think about it. Different kinds of studio methodologies that are not traditionally taught in the Beaux-Arts tradition of teaching fine arts. And so we continuously try and support efforts to diversify our curriculum, decolonize our curriculum, to use that term. So we've been doing a lot of that work, but there's a lot of work still to be done. And that's how the students embody some of these things, by their experience in their persons, but also in the perspectives that they gain in the classes that they undertake.
Real quick, I just wanted to mention, back in the day when I was there, the dean was Jean Pijanowski. His wife, I can't remember, what was her name? She ran the metals department. Anyway, what I'm trying to touch on was, back then in industrial design, we had architecture of objects with partnerships with Dow Chemicals. We had traditional industrial design curriculum, but there was a gap with metals for industrial designers, and there was no class for that. So some of us got together and we pitched the Dean Pijanowski, could you create a course for metals for industrial designers? And he was all for it. He was like, let's do it. And they in one semester enacted a course for teaching how to build metal product design. The reason I say that is that he was open to change, and it came from the students, and he invested in that change. So not that isn't happening now, but I would also be open to change from within from the students if they're ever pitching ideas or curriculum to the leadership.
Absolutely. Great point, Todd. All right, I'm looking at the time. We've already passed by 1 minute, but I wanted to summarize a little bit before we ended the session. So first, I wanted to thank the panelists, Aaron, Christine, Angela, and who am I missing?
Cesar.
Yes, Cesar. Okay. I'm sorry, senior moment. Thank you so much. Your insights were really helpful, and I think it generated a lot of interesting discussions, both at the breakout sessions and I think during this conversation here. I came away feeling that skills are as important as personality. The personal characteristics, the experiences they have, the kinds of dispositions they have as individuals, creative and not, these seem to be important, especially the values discussion that we had in the beginning, where people are talking about the fit that they want to see in an employee in an organization, where you seek out the kinds of jobs that fit you and the values that you hold. So I came away feeling that as much as we are training our students, educating them in skills and a whole range of perspectives, we need to continue to work hard at also helping them understand who they are and understand ways of expressing those things in both their portfolios as well as outside of it, by communicating more effectively, by finding better ways of reflecting their selfhood in what they do. So thank you again, everyone, for being here. I hope you enjoyed the discussions, and please continue to stay connected to the school. We as a community benefit from your perspectives, your experiences. These are important for us. We, to Todd's point about changing the curriculum in relation to students' requests, we respond to those things, but we also respond to industry, what we hear from industry. We respond to what we hear from in terms of trends that are going on. So we are constantly changing, constantly recalibrating our curriculum to make sure that we are providing our students with all that they need to be successful out there. So this session is also one of those opportunities for us to learn from you. And so thank you so much for so generously sharing your ideas, not just the panelists, but all of you. And please stay connected. And I look forward to seeing some of you and all of you perhaps in another session.